He was already a dead man walking, but even the clock seemed reluctant to count his final minutes. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? And have you ever believed that a single act of loyalty could rewrite a man's fate? The corridor outside cell B17 held the kind of silence that presses against the ribs, thick and unmoving, broken only by the distant tick of a wall clock that sounded louder than it should, as if each second carried weight. 10 minutes remained. Not long enough to become someone else, not long enough to undo what had been written, but perhaps just enough for something quieter, something unseen, to take root. Oliver Hayes sat on the narrow bench, his back straight out of habit rather than comfort, hands resting loosely against his knees as though he were waiting for orders that would never come. The overhead light cast a pale glow across the stone floor, flattening every shadow, draining the world of color until everything felt reduced to breath and time. He did not look like the kind of man stories remembered. No raised voice, no trembling hands. Just stillness. The kind that comes not from peace, but from having run out of places to put your fear. Somewhere beyond the iron door, a pair of measured footsteps approached, then paused, then continued again, slower this time, as though even duty had learned to tread carefully in moments like this. A guard cleared his throat, not unkindly, and the sound seemed to linger longer than it should. "They're ready when you are," he said, voice low, almost apologetic, as if the words themselves carried a burden. Oliver did not respond at first. His gaze remained fixed on a point just beyond the wall, somewhere far from this place, somewhere that smelled of wet grass and early mornings. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper, but it carried with it a steadiness that did not belong to a man at the end of his road. "I have a request." The guard shifted slightly. Procedures existed for everything here, even the final moments. "If it's permitted." Oliver inhaled slowly, the kind of breath one takes before stepping into cold water. "Just let me see my dog." There was a pause. Then, longer this time, stretching thin across the corridor. Not shock, not quite confusion, but something in between, something human. "Your dog," the guard repeated, softer now, as though saying it too loudly might break whatever fragile thing had just been offered. Oliver nodded once. No explanation followed. None was given. The request hung there, suspended between rules and mercy, between what was written and what could be bent. Somewhere deeper in the building, a door opened, then closed again, the echo carrying faintly like a memory. Time moved. It always did. But something had shifted. Minutes later, the corridor stirred in a way it had not before. Not louder, not hurried, but different. A presence, quiet yet undeniable, moving through the air like a change in weather. The guard returned, his expression unreadable, though his eyes lingered a moment longer than before. "You'll have a few minutes," he said. "That's all we can allow." Oliver lowered his head, just slightly, as if acknowledging something larger than either of them. And then, from beyond the threshold, a shape emerged. Not hurried, not uncertain. A German shepherd stepped into the light, its coat catching the pale glow in muted shades of sable and shadow, its posture steady, deliberate. No lead, no command, just presence. The dog paused at the doorway, ears forward, eyes scanning the room not with excitement, but with something deeper, something measured. It did not bark. It did not rush forward. It simply looked. And in that moment, the silence changed again, no longer empty, but filled with something that could not be named. Oliver lifted his gaze slowly, as if afraid that sudden movement might break the illusion. When his eyes met the dog's, something unspoken passed between them, something older than words, older than judgment. "Rex," he breathed, the name barely leaving his lips, yet it seemed to settle in the air like a truth remembered. The dog took a single step forward, then another, closing the distance not with urgency, but with certainty. Its gaze did not waver. Not once. Not even when it reached him. And yet, something was off. There was no wag of the tail, no eager movement, no familiar burst of reunion that one might expect. Instead, Rex stood still, close enough that Oliver could feel the warmth of his breath against his hand, and simply watched, as though waiting, as though searching, as though confirming something that had never needed words in the first place. The clock continued to tick, each second slipping quietly into the next, unnoticed by everyone but the walls. And somewhere in that narrowing space between time and ending, something unseen began to unfold. Not loud, not sudden, but inevitable, like truth finding its way back, step by careful step, carried not by voices, but by Paws. Rex does not move the way memory says he should. No sudden leap, no restless circle, no soft whine of reunion. Instead, he lowers his head slightly, his ears tilting forward with quiet intent, and the air between them grows tight with something unspoken. Oliver's fingers twitch once against his knee, then slowly lift, hesitating halfway, as if unsure whether this moment belongs to him or to something already decided. It is all right, he murmurs, though the words feel misplaced, like they are meant for someone else. Rex steps closer, close enough that the faint scent of rain and earth clings to his coat, a scent that does not belong in a place like this. It carries fields, distant hedgerows, the quiet breath of mornings untouched by walls. The guard by the door shifts his weight, watching now not out of duty, but out of something quieter, something he cannot quite name. Rex's gaze flicks once, not to Oliver, but past him, towards the far side of the room where the light falls unevenly across the stone. Then back again, measured, deliberate, as though mapping something invisible. Oliver notices. It is small, almost nothing, but men who have lived by instinct learn to read the absence of normal as clearly as any warning. His brow tightens just slightly. What is it, boy? The question lands softly, but it lingers. Rex does not answer in any way a man might expect. Instead, he lifts one paw and places it carefully against Oliver's right forearm. Not a gesture of affection. Not quite. There is pressure there, gentle but insistent, as though the contact itself holds meaning. Oliver inhales sharply. The sleeve of his prison shirt shifts, revealing a fragment of ink beneath the pale light. A shape, a form, the outline of a dog etched into skin that has seen too many seasons. The guard's eyes narrow, not in suspicion, but in recognition he cannot yet place. Rex presses closer, his nose brushing against the exposed tattoo, lingering there longer than a simple greeting would require. His breathing slows, deepens, as though he has found something he was searching for. Oliver's hand rises fully now, resting against the dog's neck, fingers threading into the coarse fur. For a moment, it looks almost ordinary. Almost. But the stillness remains. Too precise. Too controlled. He is trained. The guard says quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Oliver does not respond. His eyes are fixed on Rex, studying him not as a companion, but as something more complex, something layered with memory. The clock continues its steady count. 8 minutes now, each second slipping past unnoticed by most, but not by all. Rex withdraws his paw, stepping back half a pace. His head tilts slightly, ears shifting again, catching something beyond the room. A sound, perhaps, or a scent. His body stiffens, not with fear, but with purpose. It is subtle, but unmistakable to those who know. His posture changes. The softness of reunion gives way to something older, something forged in training and repetition. His eyes sharpen, focusing past Oliver once more. This time, they settle. Locked. The guard follows the line of that gaze, his breath catching almost imperceptibly as it lands on a figure standing just beyond the doorway. Another officer. Tall, composed, his uniform immaculate, his presence quiet yet firm. He had entered without notice, as men often do in places where authority speaks without sound. He watches the scene with a detached calm, hands clasped loosely behind his back. Rex does not look away. A low shift passes through him. Not a growl, not a sound that would draw attention, but something deeper, a tension that travels through muscle and bone. Oliver feels it beneath his hand, the change like a current moving through. Still water. His fingers tighten slightly. Rex, he says, softer now, as if the name alone might anchor something slipping. But the dog does not return to him. Not fully. His attention remains divided, split between the man before him and the one beyond. The guard at the door straightens, unease settling in his chest without invitation. That is odd, he mutters, though no one answers. The officer by the doorway takes a single step forward, measured, controlled. Is there a problem? His voice is smooth, almost polite, but it carries a weight that presses against the room. Rex reacts instantly, not with noise, not with aggression, but with a stillness so complete it feels like a held breath. His eyes narrow, unblinking, fixed entirely on the man now. Oliver's gaze follows, slow, deliberate, as though drawn by something he does not yet understand. For a moment, the three of them exist in a quiet triangle of awareness, each waiting for something the others cannot see. The clock ticks again. 7 minutes. Somewhere deep within the building, a distant door closes, the sound echoing faintly through stone and corridor. It feels louder than it should. Rex takes another step, this time away from Oliver. The movement is small, almost hesitant, but it breaks the fragile illusion of a simple farewell. His nose lifts slightly, testing the air, tracing something unseen. Oliver's hand drops to his side, empty now, the warmth already fading. A flicker of something crosses his face. Not fear. Not yet. But recognition. The kind that arrives slowly, like a memory pushing its way back through fog. You see it too, do you not? Oliver whispers, though the question is not meant for any man in the room. Rex does not turn. He does not need to. His body speaks in the quiet language he was trained to use, the language that does not lie. And in that moment, something begins to unravel. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of truth finding the smallest crack and slipping through the room does not breathe the same way anymore. It holds itself, tight and waiting, as though something invisible has taken a seat among them. Rex stands between two worlds now, one bound to memory, the other drawn by instinct, and he does not seem willing to choose. His body remains angled away from Oliver, yet not entirely, as if a single thread still ties him to the man behind him. But his eyes do not move. They remain fixed on the officer by the doorway, steady and unwavering, like a compass that has found its true north. The officer does not flinch. He offers a small, measured smile, the kind that belongs in polite company, not in a place where seconds are counted like currency. "It is just a dog," he says, voice calm, almost dismissive, yet something in the way he holds himself betrays a careful awareness. The guard near the door glances between them, uncertain now, his earlier composure slipping into quiet unease. "He is not acting like one," the guard replies under his breath, though the words carry further than intended. Oliver rises slowly from the bench, not with urgency, but with the deliberate control of someone who has spent years mastering the weight of his own movements. The chain of time tightens around him, yet he does not rush. There is something else here now, something that does not belong to the ending that had been prepared for him. "Rex," he calls again, softer this time, almost reverent, as though speaking too loudly might break whatever fragile truth is forming. The dog's ear flicks at the sound, a small acknowledgement, but his stance does not change. Instead, he takes another step forward, closer to the officer, his nose lifting slightly, drawing in the air with quiet precision. It is not curiosity. It is recognition, the kind that does not come from sight alone. The officer's smile fades, just slightly, replaced by something tighter, something less certain. "Control your animal," he says, though his tone lacks the authority it carried moments before. Oliver does not move to intervene. He watches, his eyes narrowing as pieces begin to shift within him, long-buried fragments pressing toward the surface. There is a rhythm to Rex now, a pattern in the way he breathes, the way his weight shifts from one paw to the other. It is not random. It is trained. It is deliberate. And Oliver knows it. A flicker of memory passes through him, quick and sharp, like light breaking through cloud. A training yard. Cold mornings. Commands spoken once, never repeated. A dog that did not question, did not hesitate. A dog that followed truth, not comfort. His hand tightens at his side. "You remember, do you not?" Oliver murmurs, though the words are meant for himself as much as for Rex. The guard hears it, his brow furrowing. "Remember what?" he asks, but no answer comes. Rex moves again, closing the remaining distance by a single measured step. He is close enough now that the officer cannot ignore him, close enough that the space between them feels charged, like air before a storm that never quite breaks. The dog's head lowers slightly, his nose hovering just inches from the officer's hand. He does not touch. Not yet. He waits. The officer shifts his stance, almost imperceptibly, but enough. A subtle movement, the kind most would miss, but not Rex. Not a dog trained to read the smallest fracture in stillness. A low sound escapes him then, not a growl, not a warning, but something deeper, something that vibrates through the floor rather than the air. The guard stiffens. "That is enough," he says, stepping forward, though his voice carries hesitation. "Pull him back." But Oliver does not move. His gaze is locked on Rex, on the way the dog holds himself, on the quiet certainty in every line of his body. This is not confusion. This is not fear. This is purpose. And purpose does not arrive without reason. The officer exhales slowly, forcing composure back into his frame. "It is reacting to stress," he says, more firmly now, as if repeating the thought will make it true. "These animals are unpredictable in unfamiliar environments." Rex does not react to the words. He does not look away. Instead, he does something else. Something small. Something that should mean nothing. He sits. Not casually. Not loosely. But precisely. His back straight, his gaze fixed, his body aligned with a discipline that does not belong to chance. Oliver's breath catches. He knows that posture. He has seen it before, not in moments of rest, but in moments of identification. In moments when the world narrowed to a single point and everything else fell away. "No," Oliver whispers, the word barely audible, yet it carries a weight that shifts the room again. The guard looks at him sharply. "What is it?" Oliver does not answer immediately. His eyes move slowly from Rex to the officer, studying him now with a clarity that had not been there before. Not as a stranger, not as a figure of authority, but as something else, something unresolved. The officer meets his gaze, steady, controlled, but there is a flicker there now, a fracture in the calm. Time continues to move. 6 minutes. The clock does not care for revelations. It does not pause for truth. But something else does. Something older. Something that moves through instinct and memory and quiet recognition. Rex tilts his head slightly, just enough to shift the angle of his gaze, and in that subtle motion, something clicks into place. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of a lock turning after years of rust. Oliver inhales sharply, the air catching in his chest as the pieces align. "He knows," he says, his voice steady now, no longer uncertain, no longer searching. The guard frowns. "Knows what?" Oliver does not look at him. His eyes remain fixed on the officer, on the man who stands just beyond the edge of understanding, holding himself together with a composure that is beginning to strain. "He knows where he has seen you before," Oliver says quietly. The words settle into the room like dust, soft but impossible to ignore. The officer does not respond. Not immediately, but his stillness changes. Just enough. And the words do not echo, yet they settle heavily, as though the room itself has chosen to hold them in place. He knows. It is not an accusation. It is not even a question. It is something quieter, something more dangerous. Recognition without proof, certainty without explanation. The officer's jaw tightens for the briefest moment before he smooths it away, the mask returning with careful precision. "You are mistaken," he replies, his tone even, measured, but there is a strain beneath it now, a tension that was not there before. Oliver does not argue. He does not raise his voice. He simply watches the way. One watches a horizon that has already begun to shift. "Am I?" he says softly, and the simplicity of it seems to unsettle more than any protest could. Rex remains seated, perfectly still, his gaze unwavering, his posture unchanged. It is the stillness that speaks now, louder than any bark, louder than any command. The guard looks between them again, his uncertainty growing into something sharper. "If there is something to say it now," he mutters, though his voice carries more unease than authority. The clock continues its steady rhythm. 5 minutes. The sound threads through the silence. Each tick a reminder that whatever is happening must happen quickly, or not at all. The officer shifts his weight, just enough to break the symmetry of his stance. "This is inappropriate," he says, turning slightly as though to leave, as though stepping away will dissolve whatever has begun. But Rex moves before he can. Not fast, not aggressively, just one step, then another. He positions himself directly in the officer's path, not blocking, not threatening, simply present, unyielding. The officer stops. For the first time, his composure fractures visibly, a flicker of something raw passing through his eyes before it is forced back down. "Remove the dog," he says, more firmly now, though the words carry an edge of urgency. The guard hesitates. His gaze drops briefly to Rex, taking in the posture, the precision, the unmistakable discipline. He is indicating something. The guard says slowly, as though speaking the thought aloud makes it real. Indicating what? The officer snaps, and the sharpness of it cuts through the room like a sudden crack in glass. Rex does not flinch. His eyes remain locked, his body steady, his presence immovable. Oliver takes a step forward now, closing the distance by inches, not to intervene, but to stand within the same line of truth that Rex has drawn. He was never wrong before, Oliver says quietly. Not once. The words carry weight, not as a defense, but as a statement of fact. The guard's attention shifts fully now, the pieces beginning to align in his mind, though he cannot yet see the full picture. What do you mean? Oliver's gaze does. Not leave the officer. I mean he does not guess, he replies. He remembers. The officer exhales, a controlled release of breath, as though steadying himself against something unseen. You are reaching, he says, though the conviction in his voice is thinning. A trained animal reacts to cues. Nothing more. Rex tilts his head again, a small movement, almost curious, yet there is no confusion in him. Only clarity. His nose lifts once more, drawing in the air between them, tracing something that lingers beyond sight. And then, slowly, deliberately, he lowers his head and touches the officer's hand. Not with affection, not with familiarity, but with purpose. A single, measured contact. The officer freezes. It is subtle, almost imperceptible, but it is there. A stillness that does not belong to calm, but to calculation. The guard sees it. The shift. The hesitation. The way the man who had seemed so composed now stands just slightly out of rhythm with himself. Sir, the guard says, more carefully now, have you met this animal before? The question hangs, fragile and sharp. The officer does not answer immediately. His gaze flicks down to Rex, then back to Oliver, then away again, as though searching for something solid to hold on to. No, he says finally, but the word lands too quickly, too cleanly, like a line rehearsed rather than spoken. Oliver's eyes narrow, not in anger, but in recognition. There it is. The fracture. The smallest crack in a story that is held too tightly for too long. That is interesting, Oliver murmurs. Because he does not greet strangers like that. The guard takes a step closer now, drawn in despite himself. How does he greet strangers? Oliver's lips press together briefly, as though weighing the answer, though he already knows it. He does not. He says simply. The clock ticks again. For minutes. The air feels thinner now, as though the room itself is running out of space to contain what is unfolding. Rex withdraws his nose slightly, but he does not step back. Instead, he shifts his weight once more, aligning himself squarely in front of the officer, his body forming a quiet barrier that is not meant to restrain, but to reveal. Oliver watches, every sense sharpened, every instinct awake. Memories press harder now, fragments aligning, patterns emerging. A face glimpsed in passing. A voice heard once, then buried. A presence that never quite fit, now rising into clarity. You were there, Oliver says, the words leaving him before he can stop them. The officer's head snaps up, his composure faltering for a fraction of a second. It is enough. Rex sees it. The guard sees it. And Oliver knows. I do not know what you are implying, the officer replies, but the steadiness is gone now, replaced by something strained, something defensive. Oliver takes another step forward, closing the space entirely, until he stands just behind Rex, both of them facing the same truth. I am not implying, he says quietly. I am remembering. The silence that follows is no longer empty. It is full of something rising, something inevitable, something that cannot be pushed back down. The clock continues. 3 minutes. And for the first time since the beginning, it feels as though time itself is no longer in control. The word remembering does not fall gently. It lands with a quiet finality, like something that has been waiting too long to be spoken aloud. The officer's expression tightens, not enough for a careless eye to notice, but enough for those who are already watching too closely. His hands, still clasped behind his back, shift slightly, the fingers pressing together with a controlled firmness that betrays the first trace of strain. You are confused, he says, slower now. choosing each word as though it must carry weight on its own. This is not the time for recollections. The pause before the last word is small, but it is there. Oliver hears it. Rex feels it. The guard notices it without knowing why. 3 minutes stretch thinner, the clock marking each one with an indifference that feels almost cruel. Rex does not move away. Instead, he leans forward once more, this time not towards the officer's hand, but towards his sleeve, the faintest brush of fabric against fur. His nose lingers there, tracing something that cannot be seen, something that exists beyond the reach of explanation. A scent. A memory. A fragment of truth carried silently through time. The officer takes a step back. It is subtle, controlled, but it is the first retreat. The guard's breath catches slightly. "Sir," he says again, more firmly now. "If there is any connection here, we need to understand it." The officer turns his head just enough to look at him, the calm returning to his face, but not to his eyes. "There is no connection," he replies. "This is a coincidence, nothing more." But Rex does not accept coincidence. He shifts his weight again, rising from his seated position in one smooth, deliberate motion. His posture changes once more, fully now, no trace of hesitation remaining. This is no longer a farewell. This is identification. Oliver feels it settle into place, the final piece of something he had not realized he was building. His voice, when it comes, is no longer uncertain. "You were not meant to be here," he says quietly, not accusing, not pleading, simply stating what has become clear. The officer's gaze sharpens. "Neither were you," he answers, and for a brief moment, something unguarded slips through, something colder, something that does not belong in this room. It vanishes as quickly as it appears, replaced again by composure, but it is too late. Oliver has seen it. The guard has felt it. And Rex has known it all along. The silence deepens, no longer empty, but charged, as though the air itself is waiting for the next breath to decide everything. He does not forget. Oliver continues, his eyes never leaving the man before him. Not voices, not places, not people. The officer exhales slowly, the sound controlled, but heavier now. "You are giving that animal too much credit." "No," Oliver replies, softer still. "I am giving him exactly what he has earned." The clock ticks. 2 minutes. The sound seems louder now, pressing against the walls, against their thoughts, against the fragile line that separates what is known from what is about to be revealed. Rex takes one final step forward, closing the distance completely. His body is calm, steady, but his focus is absolute. He lifts his head slightly, bringing his eyes level with the officer's, holding him there, as though asking a question that cannot be spoken. And then, slowly, deliberately, he turns his head towards Oliver. It is a brief movement, a glance that lasts no more than a second, but it carries everything. A confirmation, a silent message passed between them. Oliver understands. He does not know how, not fully, but he understands enough. His breath steadies, his shoulders lifting slightly as something long buried rises into clarity. "It was the dock," he says, the words forming without effort now, pulled from a place deeper than memory. That night, the shipment that never arrived. The officer's stillness breaks. Not completely, not dramatically, but enough. A flicker, a hesitation. The guard's head turns sharply. "What shipment?" he asks, but Oliver does not answer him. He cannot. Not yet. The pieces are still aligning, still finding their place. Rex returns his gaze to the officer, unwavering once more, his presence now unmistakable. This is no coincidence. This is no confusion. This is something carried across time, something that has waited until this exact moment to reveal itself. The officer straightens, drawing himself up, reclaiming what composure he can. "You are chasing shadows," he says, but the words lack the certainty they once held. "There is no proof of anything you are suggesting." Oliver nods slowly. "No," he agrees, "not yet." The admission hangs there, simple, undeniable. But it is not defeat. It is something else. Something quieter. Something that does not need to rush. The guard looks between them, his unease now fully formed, his instincts pulling him in a direction he does not yet understand. "We do not have time for this," he says, though his voice carries doubt. The clock answers him. 1 minute. The final stretch. The point where everything is meant to end. But it does not feel like an ending anymore. It feels like something else entirely. Rex does not move. Oliver does not look away. And the officer, for all his effort, cannot quite hold the same stillness he once had. Because something has already shifted. Something irreversible. And whether time allows it or not, the truth has already begun to surface. The final minute does not arrive all at once. It seeps into the room, quiet and inevitable, like a tide no one can see, but everyone can feel. The clock ticks again, and this time the sound lands heavier. Each second no longer just passing, but pressing. 50 seconds. The guard shifts his stance, the weight of protocol returning to his shoulders. Yet something in him resists the motion, as though his body no longer fully believes in the script it has followed for years. "We need to proceed," he says, but the words lack their usual certainty. Oliver does not respond. His eyes remain fixed, not on the clock, not on the door that waits for him, but on the man in front of Rex. The officer straightens once more, drawing in a breath that he holds for just a moment too long before releasing it slowly. "This has gone far enough," he says, his voice firm again, though the firmness now feels constructed, assembled piece by piece rather than born from confidence. The schedule must be respected. Rex does not move aside. He does not acknowledge the command. Instead, he stands exactly where he is, a quiet line drawn in the space between what was planned and what is unfolding. His presence is not forceful, yet it is absolute. Oliver takes a slow step forward, coming level with Rex now, his shoulder just behind the dog's steady frame. "Schedules can wait," he says softly. "Truth cannot." The words settle into the air with a weight that seems to pause even the ticking for a fraction of a second. The officer's gaze sharpens again, but this time there is no mask quick enough to fully hide what lies beneath. "You are out of time," he replies. Oliver tilts his head slightly, considering the statement, then gives a faint, almost distant nod. "Perhaps," he says, "but not all time is measured by clocks." The guard exhales quietly, his eyes flicking once more to Rex, then to the officer, then back again. Something has shifted in him, something subtle but decisive. "Sir," he says, more carefully now, with respect, "I think we should pause." The word pause hangs there, fragile and powerful at once. The officer turns to him sharply. "You do not have that authority." "No," the guard admits, "but I have judgment." The admission is simple, but it carries more weight than rank ever could. The silence deepens again, thicker now, more deliberate. Rex lowers his head slightly, not in submission, but in focus, his nose drawing closer once more to the officer's sleeve. The faintest trace of something lingers there, something carried not just in fabric, but in memory. His breathing steadies, deep and measured, as though aligning with something beyond the room. Oliver watches, every sense attuned, every fragment of recollection pulling tighter into place. "It was not meant to be seen," he says quietly, the words forming as the memory sharpens. "That night at the dock, it was meant to disappear." The officer's jaw tightens again. "You are speculating." "No," Oliver replies, his voice steady now, grounded in something that no longer wavers. "I am remembering the man who stood just outside the light." The guard's gaze snaps back to the officer, searching now, no longer neutral. "Sir, where were you posted before this assignment?" The question lands without warning. The officer hesitates. Just for a moment. But it is enough. Rex reacts instantly, not with sound, but with stillness so precise it feels like a signal. Oliver sees it. The guard feels it. The hesitation becomes louder than any answer. "I have served in many places," the officer replies finally, but the words come slower now, less certain, as though they must travel further to reach the surface. Oliver shakes his head slightly. "Not many," he says. "Just one that matters." The clock ticks again. 30 seconds. The air tightens further, each breath drawn more carefully than the last. Rex shifts his weight once more, then does something unexpected. He steps back. Just one step. The movement is small, but it breaks the line he has held so firmly. The guard frowns, confused, but Oliver does not. He understands. This is not retreat. This is completion. Rex has done what he came to do. The dog turns his head slightly, his gaze meeting Oliver's once more, and in that brief connection, everything settles. The uncertainty, the fragments, the doubt, all of it falls into place with a quiet, undeniable clarity. Oliver inhales slowly. the breath filling his chest not with fear, but with something steadier. You carried it with you, he says, his eyes returning to the officer. You thought no one would ever notice. The officer's composure falters again, more visibly this time. There is nothing to notice, he insists, but the insistence now sounds hollow, like an echo without a source. The guard steps forward, his posture no longer uncertain. Sir, I am requesting verification of your assignment history, he says, his voice firm, grounded in something he can no longer ignore. The officer turns sharply. This is not the time. No, the guard replies. This is exactly the time. The clock ticks. 10 seconds. The sound stretches, each beat slower than the last, as though even time itself is hesitating now. Rex stands quietly beside Oliver, no longer searching, no longer questioning. His work is done. The truth has been placed where it cannot be unseen. Oliver closes his eyes for a brief moment, then opens them again, steady and clear. You were there, he says one final time. Not louder, not stronger, just certain. And in that certainty, something breaks. Not loudly, not visibly, but enough. The officer's silence answers where words cannot. And as the final seconds slip away, it is no longer clear who is out of time, and who has just be the final second does not strike the way anyone expects. There is no sharp sound, no dramatic signal, no sudden end. Instead, it lingers, suspended in a strange stillness, as though time itself has chosen not to move forward until something unresolved finds its place. The clock ticks once more, but the meaning of it has shifted. It no longer commands the room. It waits. The guard stands frozen for a breath longer than duty allows, his hand hovering near the radio at his side, uncertain whether to call forward or hold back. The officer notices it. Of course he does. His eyes flick briefly to the guard's hand, then back again, calculating, measuring, searching for control that no longer sits easily in his grasp. Proceed, he says, the word sharper now, edged with urgency that cannot be disguised as authority. But the guard does not move. Not yet. Something in him has already crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. I need confirmation, the guard replies, his voice steady in a way it was not before. Your assignment history. Now, the request lands heavier than any command. The officer's lips part slightly, then close again, as though the answer he intended to give has slipped out of reach. Rex watches. He does not blink. He does not shift. His work is done, but his presence remains, a quiet anchor holding the truth in place. Oliver stands beside him, no longer a man waiting for an end, but a man standing at the edge of something that has just begun. The silence stretches, thin and fragile, until it breaks not with noise, but with a small, almost imperceptible sound. The officer exhales. Not controlled, not measured, just human. This is highly irregular, he says, though the words carry less conviction than ever before. The guard nods once. So is this, he answers. The radio crackles faintly at his side, a distant voice calling for status, for confirmation, for movement. He does not answer. Not yet. His eyes remain fixed on the officer, waiting for something that cannot be forced, only revealed. Oliver lowers his gaze briefly, then lifts it again, his voice softer now, but clearer than it has ever been. You thought it would fade, he says. What happened there? You thought no one would remember. The officer's shoulders tense, just enough to show the weight he has been carrying. There was nothing to remember, he insists, but the insistence sounds tired now, worn thin by repetition. Rex shifts slightly, stepping closer to Oliver once more, his side brushing gently against the man's leg. This time, the contact is different. Not a signal, not a warning, just presence. Just loyalty. Oliver's hand lowers, resting against the dog's neck, fingers pressing lightly into the fur as though grounding himself in something real. He remembered, Oliver says quietly, even when I could not. The words settle into the space between them, soft but unshakable. The guard inhales slowly, his decision forming fully now, no longer uncertain. He reaches for the radio, pressing the button with a firm, deliberate motion. Control, this is Unit 7, he says, his voice steady. I am requesting immediate verification of officer clearance and reassignment records. Priority. There is a pause on the other end, confusion filtering through the static. Unit 7, confirm. Is this related to scheduled procedure? The guard does not hesitate. It is related to a possible discrepancy, he replies. The word discrepancy hangs there, understated, but powerful enough to shift everything. The officer's composure fractures further, the mask slipping in a way that can no longer be hidden. You are making a mistake, he says, turning sharply towards the guard. Stand down. But the command no longer carries weight. Not here. Not now. The guard shakes his head once. Not this time. The radio crackles again, voices overlapping, questions rising. Somewhere beyond the walls, movement begins. Quiet at first, then more certain. Oliver watches it all unfold with a calm he does not fully understand, as though the storm has passed him by and now moves through others instead. It was not meant to end like this, he says softly, not to the officer, not to the guard, but to the space itself. Rex remains still beside him, his breathing slow, steady, untroubled by the tension that fills the room. He has already done what he came to do. The rest belongs to the world of men. Footsteps echo in the corridor beyond, more than before, approaching with purpose. The officer hears them. His eyes flick to the door, then back again, calculation returning in brief, desperate flashes. You do not understand what you are doing, he says, his voice lower now, almost pleading beneath the surface. Oliver meets his gaze, steady and unafraid. No, he replies. I understand exactly what I am not doing anymore. The distinction is small, but it changes everything. The door opens. Not violently, not abruptly, just enough to let in new air, new voices, new eyes that carry questions the room can no longer contain on its own. The guard steps aside slightly, not yielding, but making space for what must follow. Rex does not move. Oliver does not step back. And the officer, for all his effort, cannot return to who he was just moments before. Because something has already been seen. Something has already been known. And no clock, no schedule, no carefully written ending can take that away. The final second has passed. But the story has not ended. Not even close. The air that enters with the opening door feels different, as though it carries weight from another world, one not bound by the narrow certainty that had filled this room moments before. Two figures step inside, their movements calm but deliberate, eyes already scanning, already reading the tension that lingers like a quiet storm. They do not rush. They do not need to. Whatever has begun here has already shifted the ground beneath everyone present. The guard steps forward slightly, his posture firm now, no longer caught between instruction and instinct. Verification requested, he says, his voice clear, no longer uncertain. One of the new arrivals, a senior officer by bearing alone, nods once, his gaze settling first on Oliver, then on Rex, and finally on the man who stands too still near the center of it all. The pause that follows is not hesitation. It is assessment. Rex remains close to Oliver's side, his body relaxed now, yet his presence continues to anchor the space. His ears flick once at the unfamiliar footsteps, but he does not turn fully towards them. His focus has already done its work. What needed to be seen has been placed where it cannot be ignored. Oliver stands without restraint now, though no one has spoken the words to grant him that freedom. It has simply happened. The absence of chains feels less like a gift and more like a correction, something that should never have been there to begin with. The senior officer steps closer, his expression composed, but not detached. There is something else in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or the quiet weight of responsibility when a pattern does not align with expectation. Explain, he says, not loudly, but with enough authority that the word does not need repetition. The guard gestures briefly towards Rex, then towards the officer who now stands under a gaze he can no longer escape. The animal indicated recognition, the guard says carefully. Consistent, repeated behavior. Not random. The senior officer's eyes narrow slightly, not in doubt, but in consideration. Recognition of what, he asks. Oliver answers before anyone else can. Of a man who should not be here, he says, his voice steady, grounded in something that no longer shakes. The room stills again, though not with the same tension as before. This is different. This is the stillness that comes before understanding, not before ending. The officer at the center of it exhales slowly, then lifts his chin, attempting to gather what remains of his composure. This is absurd, he says, though the words fall flat against the quiet certainty that surrounds him. You are basing serious claims on the behavior of a dog. Rex does not react to the words. He does not need to. His presence has already spoken more clearly than language could. The senior officer shifts his gaze to him for a moment, studying the animal with a level of attention that suggests he is not dismissing anything outright. This dog, he says slowly, has training. It is not a question. It is a recognition. Oliver nods once. He does not forget what he is taught, he replies. The senior officer's eyes return to the man under scrutiny. And you, he asks, do you forget where you have been? The question is simple, but it lands with precision. The officer hesitates. It is brief, but it is enough. The room feels it. The silence that follows is no longer fragile. It is firm, grounded, the kind that waits for truth, not opinion. My records are in order, the officer says finally, but the certainty has thinned to something brittle. The senior officer glances towards the guard. Verification. The radio crackles again, voices clearer now, urgency rising beneath the surface of official tone. The guard listens, his expression tightening as the information reaches him in fragments. He looks up slowly. There is a gap, he says, a reassignment period that does not align with recorded postings. The words shift everything again, but this time, the movement is outward, expanding beyond the room, beyond the moment. The senior officer's gaze sharpens. Clarify. 6 months, the guard replies. Unaccounted for. The silence that follows is heavier than anything before it. Not because of uncertainty, but because of what is beginning to take shape. Oliver closes his eyes for a brief moment, not in relief, not in triumph, but in recognition. The missing piece. The space where memory had once been blurred, now finding its edge. The dock, he says again, softer this time. That is where it belongs. Rex shifts slightly beside him, pressing closer, his warmth steady, grounding. The officer at the center of it all does not speak. Not immediately. His gaze moves once more to the dog, then to Oliver, then away again, as though searching for a way to step outside what has already been revealed. But there is no space left for that. Not here. Not now. The senior officer steps forward, his presence no longer observational, but decisive. You will come with us, he says, not as a suggestion, but as a fact. The words do not echo. They do not need to. The man they are directed at does not resist. Not outwardly. But something in him folds inward, something that has been held too tightly for too long finally loosening under the weight of being seen. The guard exhales quietly, tension leaving his shoulders in a way that feels unfamiliar, as though he has stepped outside a role he did not realize he was confined to. Oliver opens his eyes again, the room no longer the same, the walls no longer closing in. He looks down at Rex, his hand resting once more against the dog's neck, fingers pressing lightly into the fur. You waited, he murmurs, not expecting an answer, but knowing he has already been given one. Rex lifts his head slightly, his gaze calm now, free of urgency, free of tension. His work is done, not with noise, not with force, but with quiet certainty, the kind that does not need to be defended. As the figures move, as the room shifts, as the story that was meant to end turns instead into something else entirely, one truth remains, steady and undeniable. It was never the clock that decided what mattered. It was what refused to be forgotten. The movement that follows is not hurried, yet it carries a weight that alters the rhythm of everything. The officer who once stood certain now walks between two others, not restrained, not forced, but undeniably redirected. His steps are measured, controlled, yet there is a stiffness to them, a quiet resistance that no longer holds power. The door remains open behind them, the corridor beyond no longer distant, no longer abstract, but real, present, and waiting. The guard who had first spoken stands still for a moment longer, his gaze lingering on Oliver, then on Rex, as though trying to understand how something so small could have shifted something so large. He exhales slowly, the sound almost inaudible, yet it carries relief he does not fully recognize. Procedure is suspended, he says at last, the words steady now, grounded in something that feels earned rather than assigned. Oliver does not answer immediately. He stands where he is, the space around him no longer closing in, The weight that had once pressed against his chest now lifted in a way that feels both unfamiliar and undeniable. Rex leans gently into his side, not as a signal this time, not as a warning, but as something simpler. Presence. Loyalty. Proof that something had always been there, even when it could not be seen. Footsteps echo further down the corridor, the sound fading slowly as the officer is taken away, his figure disappearing not with finality, but with the quiet uncertainty of a story that has only just begun to be told properly. The senior officer remains, his gaze thoughtful now, his posture no longer rigid, but attentive. He studies Oliver for a moment, not as a prisoner, but as a man whose place in this room has changed in ways that cannot yet be fully explained. "We will need to review everything," he says, his voice calm, measured, yet carrying a tone that suggests the outcome is no longer assumed. Oliver nods once, the movement small but certain. "You should," he replies. There is no bitterness in his voice, no accusation, only a quiet acceptance of what must follow. The senior officer glances briefly at Rex, his eyes narrowing slightly in consideration. "That dog," he says, not finishing the thought, as though the words themselves are insufficient to capture what has just occurred. Oliver's hand rests gently against Rex's neck, his fingers pressing into the fur with a familiarity that speaks of something far deeper than ownership. He does not speak, Oliver says softly, but he does not lie either. The simplicity of it lingers in the air, heavier than explanation, stronger than justification. The guard shifts slightly, stepping closer now, his earlier uncertainty replaced with something more grounded. "You said he remembered," he says, his tone no longer doubtful, but curious. "What exactly did he remember?" Oliver's gaze drifts for a moment, not to the walls, not to the door, but somewhere further, somewhere shaped by fragments that are only now returning to him with clarity. "Not everything," he admits. "Just enough." The answer is not complete, but it does not need to be. Some truths do not arrive all at once. They come in pieces, each one finding its place when the time is right. The corridor beyond grows quieter now, the earlier urgency settling into a steadier rhythm, one shaped not by schedules, but by questions that demand answers. The senior officer nods once more, as though accepting something unspoken. "You will not be returned to the holding area," he says. "Not yet." The words land softly, but they carry a significance that changes everything. Oliver exhales slowly, the breath leaving him with a weight that feels like the first true release in a very long time. "Thank you," he says, though the gratitude is not directed at the man alone, but at something larger, something that has shifted beyond any single action. Rex lifts his head slightly, his ears tilting as if catching a sound beyond the room, though there is nothing there that others can hear. His body remains calm, steady, as though the tension that once filled him has finally found its resolution. The guard watches him for a moment longer, then shakes his head slightly, a faint, almost disbelieving smile touching his lips. "I have seen many things in this place," he says quietly, "but not that." Oliver allows a small breath of something close to a smile, though it does not fully form. "Neither have I," he replies. The silence that follows is no longer heavy. It is not empty either. It is something else. Something balanced. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed, when the air is still and the ground has settled, and everything that remains feels clearer than before. Outside, beyond the walls, beyond the corridors, the world continues as it always has, unaware of the shift that has taken place within this small, confined space. But inside, something fundamental has changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. Oliver lowers himself slowly onto the bench once more, not as a man waiting for an end, but as a man allowed, for the first time in a long while, to simply sit. Rex settles beside him, his body close, his breathing steady, his presence constant. No commands are given. None are needed. The senior officer steps back, giving space, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. The guard remains near the door, no longer guarding, but watching, as though aware that he has witnessed something that will stay with him long after this moment has passed. Oliver's hand rests against Rex's fur, his fingers moving slowly, absent-mindedly, as though relearning something simple and essential. "You came back," he murmurs, the words soft, almost lost in the quiet. Rex does not respond in any way that can be measured. He does not need to. His presence is the answer. And in that stillness, in that quiet, something settles into place that cannot be undone. The ending that was written has been erased. And in its place, something far more uncertain and far more honest has begun. The room no longer feels like a place built for endings. It breathes differently now, slower, steadier, as though something unseen has lifted its weight from the walls. The harsh light above remains unchanged, pale and unkind, yet it no longer flattens everything beneath it. It reveals instead of erasing. Oliver sits quietly, his posture no longer rigid, his shoulders no longer braced against something inevitable. Rex rests beside him, his body curved slightly inward, a silent guard not against danger, but against the return of doubt. Time continues to move, but it no longer dictates. It flows. Somewhere beyond the door, voices rise and fall in low tones, measured and deliberate, carrying the language of review, of process, of correction. Not finality. Never that again. The guard remains by the entrance, though the stance has changed. He no longer watches Oliver as one might watch a man confined. He watches as one might witness something rare, something that does not fit easily into the world he thought he understood. His arms rest loosely at his sides, his gaze thoughtful, his silence no longer empty, but filled with questions that do not demand immediate answers. It will take time, the guard says at last, his voice quieter now, almost reflective. Oliver nods once, the motion slow, unhurried. Time is not what it was, he replies. The words are simple, but they carry a depth that neither man attempts to unpack. Some things are better left to settle on their own. Rex shifts slightly, lifting his head just enough to glance towards the door, his ears catching the faintest shift in sound beyond it. Footsteps. Not rushed, not uncertain, purposeful, the kind that follows understanding rather than leads it. The door opens again, this time without hesitation. The senior officer returns, accompanied by another figure, one whose presence carries a different kind of weight. Not authority alone, but oversight. Someone who looks not just at what is, but at what has been overlooked. Their eyes move through the room carefully, taking in Oliver, Rex, the guard, the space itself, as though each element holds a piece of something larger. Preliminary findings confirm irregularities, the senior officer says, his voice steady, but no longer neutral. There is a shift there, subtle but unmistakable. Oliver does not react outwardly, but his fingers tighten slightly in Rex's fur, grounding himself in something real, something that cannot be altered by words or records. The new arrival steps forward, their gaze settling on Oliver with a level of attention that feels different from all that came before. Not judgment, not suspicion, assessment. Your case is being reopened, they say, the words clear, deliberate, carrying the weight of change without needing emphasis. The room absorbs it in silence. The guard exhales softly, a sound that carries something close to relief, though he does not name it. Oliver lowers his gaze briefly, the words passing through him not as shock, but as something slower, something that takes time to fully settle. Understood, he says, his voice calm, though there is a faint shift beneath it, something that had been buried too long now beginning to rise. Rex leans into him again, sensing the change not in words, but in breath, in tension, in the subtle shifts that define what a man carries inside himself. The senior officer glances at the dog once more, his expression thoughtful. He will remain with you, he says, not as a concession, but as a decision already made. Oliver looks down at Rex, his hand resting firmly now against the dog's neck, fingers pressing into the familiar warmth. He was never meant to leave, he replies quietly. The words hang there, soft but certain. The new arrival nods once, as though acknowledging something beyond procedure, something that does not belong to reports or statements. There will be questions, they say. Many. Oliver meets their gaze, steady, unflinching. There always were, he answers. The difference now is not in the questions themselves, but in the willingness to listen to the answers. The room shifts again, not with tension, but with motion. Papers will move. Voices will rise. Decisions will be reconsidered. But here, in this moment, everything remains still. Grounded. The guard steps back slightly, giving space not out of duty, but out of respect. The senior officer turns towards the door once more, pausing briefly as though something unspoken lingers. "You were not forgotten," he says, though the words feel as much for himself as for Oliver. Oliver does not answer immediately. He looks down at Rex again, at the steady rise and fall of his breath, at the quiet certainty that had never wavered even when everything else had. "No," he says at last. "Just delayed." The distinction is small, but it changes everything. The figures begin to move again, stepping back into the corridor, carrying with them the weight of what must now be faced. The door remains open, the space no longer confined, no longer sealed. Oliver remains seated, but the meaning of it has changed. He is no longer waiting. Not for an end. Not for permission. He is simply here. Rex settles beside him once more, his body relaxed, his presence unwavering. No commands. No signals. Just quiet companionship. The guard lingers a moment longer, then gives a small nod, not formal, not required, but genuine. "I think he saved more than one thing today," he says softly, glancing at Rex. Oliver's lips shift slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. "He always does," he replies. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full of something that does not need to be named. Outside, the world continues, unaware. Inside, something has been restored. Not loudly, not perfectly, but enough. Enough for breath to return. Enough for truth to stand without fear. And in that quiet, in that stillness, the story moves forward, no longer bound by what was written, but shaped by what refused to be forgotten. Time does not rush forward after truth is spoken. It settles. It stretches. It reshapes itself around what has been revealed, as though even the walls must learn how to hold a different reality. The room remains quiet, but no longer still in the same way. There is movement now, not in footsteps or voices, but in understanding. Oliver sits with a calm that feels unfamiliar even to him, his breathing slow, measured, no longer bound to the rhythm of a clock that once dictated everything. Rex rests beside him, his head lowered but alert, his presence no longer searching, no longer questioning, only staying. Outside, the corridor carries a different tone. Not urgency, not routine, something more deliberate. Conversations no longer clipped and efficient, but layered, cautious, aware that what has been uncovered cannot simply be folded away and forgotten. The door remains open, and through it, the faint scent of colder air drifts in, carrying with it something distant. Not freedom, not yet, but the idea of it. The guard shifts slightly, stepping further into the room, no longer positioned as a barrier, but as a witness. His voice, when it comes, is softer than before. "They are reviewing everything now," he says. Oliver nods once, not asking how long, not asking what comes next. Some questions no longer need answers immediately. Rex lifts his head slightly, his ears tilting towards the corridor as if tracking the unseen movement of decisions being made. There is no tension in him now, only awareness. A quiet readiness that does not demand action, the kind that waits without fear. Minutes pass, though they no longer feel like minutes. The ticking of the clock fades into the background, no longer the loudest presence in the room. It exists, but it does not command. Somewhere in the distance, a door closes. Another opens. Footsteps approach, pause, then continue. The rhythm of the place has changed, subtly but permanently. Oliver's hand moves absently along Rex's neck, fingers brushing through the fur in slow, thoughtful motions. It is not something he notices himself doing. It is simply what remains when tension leaves the body. "You knew," he murmurs quietly, not expecting a response. Rex does not look up, but his tail shifts once against the floor, a small, almost imperceptible movement. Enough. The guard watches them for a moment, then looks away, giving them space not out of duty, but out of respect for something he cannot fully explain. "I have been here a long time," he says after a pause. "I have seen men walk through that door with certainty, and others with none at all." He glances back at Oliver. "You were different." Oliver does not react immediately. He considers the words, not as praise, not as judgment, but as observation. "No," he says softly. "I was just not finished." The distinction lingers. The guard nods slowly, as though understanding more than the words themselves. The sound of approaching footsteps returns, clearer now, closer, accompanied by voices that carry weight, authority, and something else. Finality, perhaps, but not the kind that ends. The kind that begins. The senior officer reappears at the doorway, his posture unchanged, but his expression different. There is no longer uncertainty there, only decision. He steps inside, pausing just long enough to take in the room again, though now it feels like a formality rather than necessity. Oliver Hayes, he says, his voice steady. Clear. Oliver looks up, meeting his gaze without hesitation. Yes. The single word holds no fear, no resistance, only presence. The officer inclines his head slightly. You will be transferred to review custody immediately, he continues. Your sentence is formally suspended pending full investigation. The words land softly, but they carry a force that moves through the room like a quiet wave. The guard exhales, the breath leaving him fully this time, as though something he had not realized he was holding has finally been released. Oliver does not move at first. He simply absorbs it, allowing the meaning to settle into place, to take root without rushing it. Understood, he says at last. Rex lifts his head fully now, his gaze moving from Oliver to the officer, then back again, as though confirming what has already been decided. There is no excitement in him, no sudden burst of energy, only calm acceptance, the kind that comes when something is exactly as it should be. The officer steps aside slightly, indicating the open doorway, no longer a threshold to an end, but to something unknown, something unwritten. Oliver rises slowly, not with urgency, but with intention. His movements are steady, grounded, as though each step belongs to him again. Rex stands with him, close at his side, not needing instruction, not needing guidance. The bond between them requires neither. As Oliver reaches the doorway, he pauses briefly, his gaze drifting once more across the room that had nearly become his last. The bench, the light, the walls that had once pressed in. They are the same, and yet, entirely different. He does not linger. Some places are not meant to be carried forward. He steps into the corridor, Rex beside him, the guard following a step behind, no longer as a watcher, but as a quiet witness to what has changed. The air outside feels colder, sharper, more real. Voices soften as they pass, eyes follow, but no one speaks. There is no need. The truth has already spoken for itself. And in that quiet passage, in the steady rhythm of footsteps moving forward, one thing becomes clear without needing to be said. Some endings are never meant to happen. They are only there to reveal what refuses to end. The corridor does not echo the same way as before. Each step Oliver takes now lands with a quiet certainty, no longer measured against an ending, but against something unfolding. The walls stretch longer than he remembers, the air cooler, carrying the faint scent of polished stone and distant rain filtering through unseen vents. Rex walks beside him without a lead, without command, his pace matched perfectly, as though the distance between them has always been measured in instinct rather than steps. The guard follows a short distance behind, not close enough to direct, not far enough to disengage, his presence now something quieter, something that belongs to the moment rather than the role. They pass doors that remain closed, each one holding its own story, its own silence, but none of them reach out to claim Oliver anymore. He is no longer part of that stillness. He is moving through it. Ahead, the corridor opens slightly, widening into a space that feels less confined, though no less controlled. Light shifts here, softer, less harsh, filtering through high windows that reveal nothing but a pale suggestion of sky. It is not freedom, but it is closer to it than anything he has felt in a long time. Rex pauses briefly beneath that light, his head lifting just enough to catch the subtle change in scent, the faint trace of air that has touched something beyond walls. Oliver notices, though he does not stop. Some pauses do not need to be shared. You can feel it, can you not? He murmurs quietly, his voice low, almost lost in the open space. Rex moves again without hesitation, falling back into step, his presence steady, grounded. The sound of footsteps ahead draws their attention, measured and deliberate, approaching with purpose rather than urgency. Two figures wait at the far end, one of them the senior officer, the other a woman in a dark coat, her posture composed, her gaze sharp yet not unkind. She watches Oliver as he approaches, not as a prisoner, not as a suspect, but as something still being understood. Mr. Hayes, she says, her voice calm, precise, carrying the weight of someone who deals in facts rather than assumptions. Oliver stops a few feet from her, Rex settling quietly at his side. Yes, he replies. The woman studies him for a moment longer, then glances briefly at Rex, a flicker of recognition passing through her expression. Not surprise, not disbelief, just acknowledgement. We have begun reconstructing the missing period, she says. Your recollection of the doc is consistent with preliminary findings. The words do not rush. They arrive carefully, placed with intention. Oliver absorbs them without visible reaction, though something shifts beneath the surface, something that has been waiting for confirmation rather than hope. It was not clear at first, he says quietly. Not until he showed me. He glances down at Rex, his hand brushing lightly against the dog's neck. The woman follows his gaze briefly, then returns her attention to Oliver. The individual identified by the dog is currently under review, she continues. There are inconsistencies in his service records that align with your statement. The corridor seems to hold its breath again, though this time it is not tension that fills it, but clarity forming, piece by piece. The senior officer steps slightly to the side, allowing the woman to lead, her authority subtle but unmistakable. You understand, she says, that this process will not be immediate. There will be interviews, cross-referencing, verification. Oliver nods once. I understand. There is no impatience in him, no urgency, only a quiet readiness to let the truth unfold at its own pace. Rex remains still, his posture relaxed, his eyes attentive, as though he senses that the moment no longer requires action, only presence. The guard behind them shifts his weight slightly, his gaze moving between Oliver and the woman, absorbing every word, every implication. He is no longer simply observing. He is learning. In the meantime, the woman continues. You will be held under review status, not as a condemned individual, but as a protected witness. The distinction is clear, deliberate, and it settles into the space with quiet significance. Oliver inhales slowly, the breath deeper than before, as though his lungs are remembering something they had forgotten. Understood. He repeats, though the word carries more weight now, more grounding. The woman nods once, satisfied, then steps aside slightly, gesturing towards a side corridor branching away from the main path. This way, she says. Oliver hesitates for just a moment, his gaze drifting briefly back down the corridor they came from, towards the space that had nearly defined his final moments. It feels distant now, not erased, but no longer holding him in place. He turns without hesitation and follows. Rex moves with him, silent, precise, his presence unwavering. The guard lingers for a second longer, then falls into step behind them once more, though now his role feels different, less defined by control, more by quiet respect. The side corridor is narrower, but not oppressive. The lighting is softer, the air less heavy. Doors line the walls, but they are different from the ones before. Not sealed, not final, just closed, temporary. As they walk, the sound of their footsteps blends into a steady rhythm, no longer counting down, but carrying forward. Oliver's hand brushes lightly against the wall as he passes, his fingers grazing the cool surface, grounding himself in the reality of movement, of change. You stayed, he says quietly, almost to himself. Rex does not look up, but his tail shifts once, a small, steady motion that speaks without sound. The woman glances back briefly, catching the exchange, though she does not interrupt. Some conversations do not require translation. They reach the end of the corridor, where a single door stands slightly ajar, light spilling through the narrow gap. The woman pauses, turning back to Oliver one final time. This is not the end, she says. Oliver meets her gaze, steady, clear. No, he replies. It never was. The door opens wider, revealing a room that is neither cell nor corridor, neither confinement nor release. Something in between. Something waiting. Oliver steps forward, Rex beside him, and as the door closes gently behind them, the world does not end. It expands, quietly, steadily, as truth continues to find its way into the light. The room does not close around him when the door settles into place behind them. It holds. It breathes. It waits. Soft light spills across a simple table, two chairs, and a narrow window set high in the wall where a pale stretch of sky drifts like something half-remembered. Oliver steps inside and stops, not out of hesitation, but to feel the difference. It is subtle, almost nothing, yet it changes everything. Rex moves ahead by a pace, then turns and sits, not as a command, but as a quiet confirmation that this space is safe enough to be still. The woman remains near the door, her posture composed, her eyes attentive without pressing. She does not fill the silence. She lets it settle. Outside, the corridor fades into a distant hush, footsteps passing without urgency, voices lowered, the building itself adjusting to a truth that has already begun to rewrite its own memory. Oliver draws a slow breath, deeper than any before, and for a moment he simply stands with it, letting it reach places that had forgotten how to open. His hand lifts and rests against Rex's neck, fingers threading through the fur with a familiarity that feels like returning rather than beginning. "We made it this far," he murmurs, not asking, not declaring, just placing the words gently into the air. Rex does not move, but the steady rhythm of his breathing answers in a way that does not need language. The woman steps forward then, taking the chair opposite the empty one, her movements unhurried, her gaze steady. "We will begin with your account," she says, her voice even, grounded. Not to challenge it, to understand it. Oliver nods once and takes the other chair, sitting not as a man placed, but as a man choosing. The wood beneath him is plain, the surface worn smooth by years of use, yet it does not carry the weight of endings. It holds questions instead. He looks at his hands for a moment, at the faint lines, the scars that speak in quiet ways, then lifts his gaze again. "It was late," he says, the memory coming without force now, drawn by something that no longer resists. Cold enough that the air felt sharp. There were crates, too many for a simple delivery. The woman listens without interruption, her pen resting but not moving, her attention fixed not on, capturing every word, but on the shape of what is being given. In him, Oliver continues, the image settling into clarity. Not in the light, just beyond it, watching, waiting for something to pass without being seen. Rex's ears shift slightly at the change in Oliver's tone, not with tension, but with alignment, as though the memory itself carries a scent he recognizes. Oliver glances down at him, a brief exchange, then back again. "I thought I had imagined it," he admits. "Until today." The woman inclines her head a fraction, acknowledging the weight of that sentence. "Memory does not always return when we ask it to," she says. "Sometimes it returns when it is safe." The word safe lingers, gentle and precise. Oliver considers it, then gives the faintest nod. "He made it safe," he says, his hand resting more firmly against Rex's neck. The dog leans into the contact, steady, certain, as if accepting the role without needing to claim it. The woman allows a small pause, then asks, "What happened next?" Oliver exhales slowly, not from strain, but from the effort of placing pieces in their proper order. "The shipment changed hands," he says. "Not through the route it was meant to. There was a gap, a moment where it could have been corrected." He looks up, meeting her eyes. It was not. The room remains quiet, but not empty. Each word settles into it, building something that no longer feels fragile. Outside, a faint tap of rain begins against the high window, soft and irregular, like a distant clock that has forgotten how to count. Rex's head tilts slightly towards the sound, then returns, content to let it be. The woman's pen moves at last, not to record everything, but to anchor the direction. "We will follow that gap," she says. "We will place every step around it until it closes." Oliver listens, then nods, the motion steady. "It will not close," he says quietly. "Not anymore." There is no defiance in the words, only certainty. The woman studies him for a moment, then accepts it with a small, measured breath. "Then we will learn to live with what it shows," she replies. Time moves, but gently now, measured not by urgency, but by understanding. Questions come and go, each one careful, each answer given without strain, as though the story has finally found the right way to be told. Rex remains beside Oliver, sometimes still, sometimes shifting slightly, his presence a constant line that does not waver. At one point, Oliver pauses, his gaze drifting to the window where the rain has grown steadier, the glass tracing faint paths of water that catch the light. I thought it would end in that room, he says, almost to himself. The woman follows his gaze, then returns it to him. Some stories end, she says. Others refuse. Oliver's lips move slightly, not quite a smile, but something close, something that belongs to recognition rather than relief. He lowers his hand once more to Rex, fingers resting where they have learned to be. He refused, Oliver says. Rex breathes in, slow and even, then out again, the sound soft as the rain against the glass. The woman closes her notebook gently, not as a conclusion, but as a pause that holds meaning. We will continue, she says. Oliver nods, not because he must, but because he can. The room remains as it is, simple, quiet, unchanged in its form, yet entirely different in its purpose. Outside, the corridor carries on, voices moving, doors opening and closing, a world adjusting itself in small, necessary ways. Inside, 2 chairs, a table, a window, and a dog that chose not to forget. Oliver leans back slightly, his posture easing in a way that no one instructs, no one demands. It simply happens. He closes his eyes for a brief moment, not to escape, but to rest in the space that has finally made room for him. When he opens them again, nothing has ended. Not the questions, not the past, not the quiet work ahead, but something else has. The waiting. And in its place, something quieter remains. Not victory, not certainty, just grace, settling in the small distance between a man and the dog who stayed when everything else did not.